Morning. Hey, good morning, gang. Good to see you on another Sunday morning. A day I look forward to all week, every week. We're in the book of Hebrews, of course. And, I'm standing here thinking how easy it would be just to start talking about this book and just talk about it until class is over and say class dismissed. It'd be very easy to do that. So we're going to be going into the 11th chapter today. And so we'll have some things to clarify as we begin the chapter, and then we'll have a bunch of people with some very, with some things in common, but expressed in different ways. So that'll be interesting, I think, for us as we get into that. Jim, would you like to lead us in a prayer this morning? Thank you, sir. Amen. Okay. All right, clicker's working. Very good. Okay. All right, so we're going to focus on verses 1 through 3 for a bit this morning to set us up for the rest of the chapter. And so the questions, our preview questions will reflect those 3 verses. I won't have questions for like every person in here and what did this one do and what did that one do. We won't do that. We'll just figure that out as we go. So anyway, as we look at the questions, what are the 2 parts of faith? Okay, the 2 parts of faith. What is the meaning of assurance in Hebrews 11:1? Is faith a theoretical belief only? If not, what else is it? All right. What is the meaning of substance? Which we have in the King James translation in Hebrews 11:1. These 2 different words are used, assurance and substance, and I think that it's worthwhile to look at both of those words and see what they mean, because I think, of course, one is, these are the same verses and just different. One is the ESV, one is the New American Standard, or one is the, ESV, and one is the King James. But the words are significant, and I think a comparison of them, or seeing how they complement each other and why they're translated in this, these different words would be interesting. What is the meaning of conviction in Hebrews 11:1? And why do theists believe that the universe came into existence in the way described in Hebrews 1, 2, and 3? Okay. Very, very complex answer to that question. So you just be ready for that. All right. Okay. All right. So we're going to be talking about faith in this chapter. It's kind of like in 1 Corinthians 15. It's all about resurrection. This chapter is all about faith. And when you think about what's been taught up to this point, which we're not going to, of course, review all of that right now, but you just think about how strong his arguments have been. He has exhorted, He has taught us about Christ, about his priesthood, about his sacrifice, about his covenant, the folly of going back to the old system that they had been accustomed to, warnings about what's going to happen if you do that. I mean, just in every way possible, God has through this book has exalted Christ and everything that is associated with him and compared it to the old system. And this is just another wave of persuasion that the writer is presenting to solidify the reasons for them not to go backward to that old system. And so he's talked about all of those things, and now he's going to say, this is what faith looks like, right? So in these opening verses, he is not giving us a definition of faith, but he is describing what faith does in a person's life, okay? And so he's going to speak about it in a couple of different terms as we get into this first verse here. And so this is the faith that will save your soul, right? This is the faith that God is looking for, that if you practice this, then you have assurance, and we're going to talk about what that means here in just a moment. So he is giving them this information, which is, that's a very sterile way of saying it because it's so deep and soulful and spiritual, the things that are before us here. But he's giving this to them so that they just have a solid foundation to stand upon, and by extension, he gives that to us also as we read their mail. Okay. So we'll just get into that here. So the two parts of faith. The first part is acceptance of what God says. That's the first part. Now, you say, well, if I accept what God says, that should be it. Well, we know from James 2, for instance, that demons accept what God says, okay? So that within and of itself doesn't really mean that much by itself, okay? We see people in the Gospels who saw, for instance, Lazarus raised from the dead. They knew he was raised from the dead, and yet they didn't do the second part. Okay, so just agreeing, mental assent with what God says, but then the second part is putting one's, that should say, trust in it. Okay. We could spin that a little bit, but anyway, yeah. But it's putting one's trust in it. So you accept what he says, and then you put your total trust. Now, if you or I do that, then our lives are going to look a certain way. We're going to live a certain way if we do that part. So this is what it looks like in our life: acceptance of what God says, or mental assent, and then putting our total trust in it. Another way of saying it is living in accord with the reality of things hoped for, living as if the things hoped for are real. Okay, and so we'll talk about that here in just a moment when we talk about this word assurance. So as we look at this first verse, he says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. Okay, or the King James, the substance, and we'll talk about that word also. So this word that is translated assurance is better understood as reality. Okay, so those people who are linguists and study these things, look at and present this word as reality, okay? So the philosophers used to use this word to distinguish reality from mere appearance, okay? All right, and so it was also used for the guarantee, okay, or title deed to property in the business transactions of everyday life, okay? So this assurance, this is the guarantee, this is the reality, okay? So faith is described as the reality, okay? It points to the reality of the things hoped for. And so things that are hoped for, are they seen or are they not seen? Okay, right? And so Paul is real clear about that in Romans 9 when he talks about hope. Hope, why do we yet hope for what we see? Okay, so we don't, so it's things that we haven't seen, and yet our faith is the reality. It points to the reality of those things actually being true, okay? So living, if we have faith, this kind of faith, both parts, then we're living in accordance with the reality of things hoped for. We're living as if those things truly, really exist, see? And so when we talk about faith that saves, or faith that causes you to walk in a certain manner, to live your life in a certain way, it is a faith on your part and my part that says whatever God says, whatever those things are that we're looking forward to, that those things are real, okay? Those things are real. And that's pretty strong. That's a big deal. Let me ask you, living in this world, how hard or easy is it to not really, to get distracted from that and question and wonder, are those things actually, is there really a heaven? Is there really a judgment day coming? Do we really have this future? Every now and then, and one of the things that Satan uses, at least he has on me in my life, is if you're going to do something you shouldn't do, okay, I'm human like everybody else, right? But this is, and maybe this resonates with you, is that, well, this little thought way in the back of your head, well, maybe it's not really true. Maybe it's not. Now, it's not that you don't believe that these things are true. But what I'm saying is that to weaken us, to find a chink in the armor, that's usually where he'll go, at least in my case. Now, I'm not trying to think this up. I'm not trying to, it just comes to you. There's a chance that maybe it's not. So, okay, so you go ahead and, but you don't really believe that, and then you do it, and then you're remorseful, and got to go through that whole thing, right? See? But that's what this means. So if you really, truly believe those things are real. Yes, Sheila?
But it pops up, but then if you done tasted that God is good,
yep.
it really go real quick.
Yeah.
Because you already know and you done experienced God for yourself,
Yeah.
So it's just how deep the faith is in God, and the trust. And you just really, really, really trusting him, like I can walk around blind, but I'm trusting him to lead me the way.
Right.
And I'm at peace with that.
Yeah.
Because I ain't got no control over nothing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And here's the thing, too, is that One of the things that Paul said about Scripture inspired by God is that it provides training in righteousness. And so we are increasingly, I mean, we're doing it right now. We're training, God is training us in righteousness. And so the instances of what I just described occurring in our lives should, from the time we begin, as we progress, be less and less, happening in our life because we're being trained. I think that's one of the reasons that John in 1 John says that no one who was born of God sins. That keep on sinning, like in Hebrews, and that person cannot sin, can't long term. Okay, and one of the reasons is because we're not trained that way. We're trained not to. Okay, and so when it comes to long term, I'm just going to have this sin in my life. I'm just going to do it. Can't do that anymore. Doesn't mean I can't sin, but I can't do that because I'm just not there. Okay, yeah, Todd.
I might be thinking about this in a weird way. Can we go back one slide? Is that possible?
It is, because we have technology. You want to go to this one or the one before?
The one before that.
Okay.
Your definition.
Yeah.
Maybe it's before this one. See how much I've been paying attention.
Yeah, I know. So these are questions,
You had, yeah, I think,
and that's the two parts. Or was it one of the questions?
no, it was your definition right at the beginning.
Okay. Well, this is what I had. Okay. These two parts, acceptance and putting trust in, and then living in accord with the reality of things hoped for, or living as if those things hoped for are real.
Yeah, okay, so this is the one I was looking at.
Okay.
This is the one that I guess it bugged me a little bit. It says living as if the things hoped for are real.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the writer, to me, is saying something a little different.
Okay.
Because as I'm reading this, I'm seeing this instead of living as if the things hoped for are real, I'm just reading it as living knowing that the things hoped for are real. And maybe that's a fine line.
It's fine. It's fine. It's like one of those spider web fine.
Well, and I guess, I just think different. Everybody here knows.
Well, we know that, yes. Yeah. No surprise there.
But I think that maybe this writer, what he's trying to say is that it is our faith that makes those things real. They're real. But it is our faith that makes those things real, as far as we are concerned. If we don't have that faith, the inverse is true. If we don't have that faith, those things aren't real for us.
Well, that's true. They're not, well, no.
Not for us.
Well, yes and no. I mean, they're real no matter whether we believe or not.
But it would have.
But for us, there's no yeah.
If we
There's
did
no-
not have the faith,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
wouldn't have.
We wouldn't, yeah.
They might as well not be real.
Right, yeah.
And so I guess maybe I'm saying the same thing in my own little Todd way, but to me it is more definite than as if they were real. I think it is, faith is the realization that it is real.
Well, yeah, and that's what as if it is real means. We're living, we could say, in a way that acknowledges the reality of those promises.
Just acknowledging that it's real.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's similar, yeah. Did I have, oh, yes, Gina? You're supposed to be over here, Okay, yeah.
I
Yeah.
Because going back to previous things that you taught in the class, when God promises something, it's as though it's actually happened right now. It's a fact. It's not
Yeah.
something. So we are putting our faith, just like Abraham did, in the promise that God, knowing that that's God's promise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it's fact. It just is fact.
Right.
And we live our lives because that's fact.
Yeah.
Abraham lived his life. Those promises were fact by God.
Yeah.
And, so that's I think I'm kind of in line with Todd or whatever. It's just, we know, we have rock solid acceptance that that's the facts
Mm-hmm.
that God has put in place for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the assurance that we're looking for. We know that that's fact.
Yeah. 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 Oh, yes, Lisa.
So I like this breakdown of like kind of past and then what I think of as today and the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was a really young, immature Christian, heaven was the things hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think the assurance of today's promises, all the promises that God has the Bible proposed to
Sure.
acknowledge
Yeah.
and accept and realize
Mm-hmm.
the active living out that those promises are real is how faith impacts my life and how it changes me today in a way that just looking forward to heaven doesn't, if I believe the promises for today. And that, I think, is all tied up into that part that says the assurance of things hoped for is faith today, that I know that God will grow my faith, that I give him the faith part, he grows my faith, and I just need to connect to the vine.
Mm-hmm.
That is as important as the final goal of heaven. I'm seeing that as half that is yesterday, believing what happened is the way God said it happened. And then the assurance of things hoped for is today and tomorrow.
Okay. Because there are promises that pertain to our life today.
Absolutely.
Right,
And
yeah.
seeing the kingdom as being active and not just when you get to heaven, but seeing it starting in your life today.
Yeah.
It's like a mental game shift for how you think about living under God's rule.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah. And let's look for that in some of these examples. I'll bet it's there. Yeah. Steve?
So that interchange that you're having between you and Lisa right now is maybe the best way of really understanding when Romans says from faith unto faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you start growing in faith, you actually come to the realization of now, and it grows your faith.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
when
Yeah.
you finally embrace the reality of what's going on here,
Yeah.
your faith causes you to see things more clearly, and your faith grows and grows and grows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just exactly what you and Lisa were doing is that, Webster's definition of faith unto faith, that's it right there.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you incorporate heaven into it, it's all part of one big picture of faith, of things hoped for, and that's just the ultimate fulfilling of that. Yeah, Steve.
And so that's the saddest part of folks that we have all known, and I'm not trying to say it in any proud way, but we've all known people whose faith, whose religion perhaps is the better word, is completely satisfied by attending on Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it is so much more than attending on Sunday morning, kind of out of obligation, because it misses the whole part of the transformation process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, that idea of, Sunday morning, as the way that you're talking about it, we all have to start out with training wheels, right? We all have to start out in very elementary, very basic training wheels. But we must, as we go forward, be able to take those training wheels off, in a sense, and move on. Because we can only go so far, and I could get into that analogy, but yeah. So yeah, and what he's talking about here is is Christianity. I don't know how far up did they go, 401, however, yeah. Yeah, moving on, like he said in chapter 6, moving beyond the elementary principles, okay? So that's what we're doing here. There's another word used that, where it says that faith is the substance of things hoped for. So there's the assurance, the reality. The substance means that which stands under, okay? So the foundation, so faith is the foundation upon which your hope rests, okay? See? So we can put those two things together pretty easily. The reality, those realities that are beyond our physical eyes right now are the foundation for our faith. You can see, so you can see how these words kind of complement one another. The thing that holds up your hope is your faith. Okay? So if we accept as true what God has done and doing, and we have complete trust that He will keep His word from now through eternity, if we do certain things, which means these expressions of faith that we're going to see, then faith is the confidence that we have in what we hope for. We don't have it yet as far as those future promises that go beyond this life. We're going to read of people here in Hebrews 11 who died without receiving certain promises, just like we may. We don't know for sure that the Lord won't come back before our physical death. But if He doesn't, we're going to die without having received certain promises in this life. But we will, as they have seen them from a distance by faith. We know that they're there. We know they're real. We see them from a distance, okay? But then that hope will be made sight, and faith will be made sight, okay? After this life is done, as far as those things that are future, okay? Comments, questions? Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Let's hang with him. Hang with this writer, see if he can. All right. So the assurance, the guarantee, the substance, the foundation, okay, of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Okay? The conviction of things not seen. So you think about Paul's beautiful statement in 2 Corinthians 4, right? Though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is renewed day by day. For momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison, right? While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. We're looking at them, okay? For the things that are seen are temporal. This isn't our focus is not primarily upon the things in this world, this life, this existence that are passing away, okay? For the things that are seen are temporal, the things that are not seen are eternal. So we see those things just like these individuals, he'll talk about, especially down at verse 13 and following, that we see these promises from a distance. Okay? And of course, the Hebrew writer is primarily, it seems to me, focused upon their ultimate salvation, which they are about to give up if they don't turn back around and keep going where they started. Okay? And so that seems to be the focus here as he's talking about things. And so the conviction, the proof or demonstration by means of which any proposition is shown to be true or false. Okay, we'll talk about that, yeah.
I mean, conviction is a strong word.
It sure is.
First Thessalonians 5 talk about it because the gospel came to you not only in word, but also in power, in the Holy Spirit, and with full conviction.
Mm-hmm.
There's a power that's there, and so this faith is going to not only give you this substance, this assurance of the things you hope for, but there's this power of understanding over things that aren't seen that you can see because of your faith.
That's, yeah, it sure is. You know, my little, my little concise definition of conviction has always been that it is a firm, settled belief. Okay? My faith is the evidence. This is how strong this is. Our faith is the evidence that those things are real. Okay? Yeah.
I always thought it's the conviction was because we were given evidences. Not that my faith was the evidence, but the conviction is based on evidence, just like in a court. There's a conviction, but it's not based on a whim. There's evidence there.
Well, yeah.
Is that a misuse of that?
No, it's not. No, but look, yeah. So faith is the conviction of things not seen. Okay, it is the conviction, and yes, that conviction. Okay, so here my little definition here: the proof or demonstration. So if you're in court and somebody's on trial, and are they innocent or are they guilty? Well, if they're going to be convicted, that means that it has to be proven, demonstrated that the charges against them are true. Okay?
I'm thinking about how people will say, you don't believe because you don't have faith. My thought back would be, look at the evidence then. Not
Right.
just a feeling inside of you, but look at the evidence
Right.
to get that faith.
Yeah. That's right.
It's not a misuse of that.
That's right. So yeah. So that's what I always go to also is that, well, there is evidence. And in fact, Bible faith is not Bible, okay. Faith is not Bible faith if there's no evidence. There is evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm convicted. I'm fully convinced.
Yep.
Those things not seen. The evidence that I have seen, my faith gives me full assurance and I'm fully convinced of these things that we cannot see.
That's right.
And so that has to be based on it. That's the whole thing, right? The evidence is there, and that's what this whole chapter then illuminates that, right?
Yeah.
It illuminates how people operated with that supposition.
Yeah. Yeah, it was last night I was in the house and I was seated in a position where I looked up through the skylight and there was the moon sitting right there. And I look at, and especially, studying this stuff is even more acute, right? And I look up there and it's like, that's not you, God, but that is, I know you're there. You have to be. You put that moon up there so I can look at it and go, that thing didn't get there, but it didn't get there by itself. It's serving a purpose for the earth, and somebody thought about that. and put it where it is so that it would serve the purpose it serves for us in this world. You know, that's evidence. It's right in front of my face. And of course, Romans 1 puts those things right at the top, that nobody has an excuse not to believe he is when you look at his creation. Right? Yeah, Kevin?
Something that has been on my mind a lot with that, because in classes like this, we talk about faith and belief. And sometimes when those things are discussed with, non-Christians, when I talk to them, that the view of the world almost seems like faith and belief, that means that you think, like you think that.
Yeah.
And I think this, and other people think other things. And I know that that's influenced my thinking sometimes. And so going back to the idea of conviction, like when we're here and we're talking about faith and belief, that it doesn't mean that I think that that's the case. It means I know that the things not seen are real.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know that's maybe another fine line, but that was something that has made a big difference to me.
Well, have you ever heard somebody say, I don't just believe it, I know it. Okay? So what I'm saying is that what the writer here, and let's explore this just for a second, okay, is that if you believe it, okay, so it's based upon evidence. So I'm trying to look at this thing where, I don't just believe it, I know it. Well, that statement's always bugged me, because this kind of belief, you do know it. Okay, yes, it's based on evidence. 2 + 2 is 4. And so we can show very easily that 2 + 2 is not 3. Okay, the evidence says it's 4. And so based on that, we know. I mean, there's a good sermon I could preach, just call it knowing. And some of these things in the Bible, knowing that the proof of your faith, so we do know. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I know that the thoughts from the perspective from the world has influenced my thinking, so that when I talk about faith, sometimes I think of it like that faith is just a belief that you think something is true.
Yeah.
Versus, and I think this is what you're saying, is that the Hebrew author is saying, when he's talking about faith, that's synonymous with that is.
That's right.
And so
That's right.
it's not necessary to have a statement of, I don't just believe it, I know it.
Yeah.
That's not how God thinks about it.
Yeah.
If you believe it, you know it.
Yeah. Even though we walk by faith, not by sight, that doesn't say we walk by faith, not by knowledge. Not by any kind of evidence that what God says is, that's not what he says there. We don't see it. We're not experiencing some of the things of the future, but we know they're there. And that's what faith does. Yeah.
It's not an opinion.
It's not an opinion. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, Chris?
Well, so there's a lot of people who believe in God,
That's right.
but they don't have this,
That's right.
right? They don't have this, right? So even those people that believe in God or believe in a deity are seen out here, but they don't have the confidence of the things that are, what are those things that are hopeful? We're going to talk about that, right? Hebrews is talking about that. That remember, what we're talking about here are people, guys, you're stuck in the past here, right? But the past has always been about faith.
Yeah.
And that faith has always looked ahead.
Yeah.
It's always looked ahead to the exact place where you're at now.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's looked for. And in every case you're going to see, they had assurance that the things they hoped for were going to come to fruition, and they were convicted in their belief in that regard and took action and did behaviors and did things from Abraham onward.
That's right.
That you go, why'd you do that? Well, because assurance and I'm convicted.
Yeah. Yeah. So he says now in verse 2, for by it the people of old received their commendation or approval. The men of old were approved, okay, received their commendation. Now, Abraham believed God, and same word, it was credited to him as righteousness. And then James adds, and he was called the friend of God. See? And so by faith, this kind of faith, and that's really important. Okay? By it, the men of old, the people of old received their commendation. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God. Okay? They could even have put a capital W there if they would have liked to, but so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible, which is fascinating to me. Sheila.
Okay. Listen, is faith, trust, believe,
Mm-hmm.
and hope all like the same thing? You know,
Faith, trust, and belief are the same thing, and hope is based upon it.
and God say, trust in me.
Yeah.
Is that like a different,
Yeah.
in my mind it's making sense, but trusting, like
Mhm.
you put all your trust in him,
Mm-hmm.
but then he wants us to have faith in him.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's what sustains our hope. So our hope is desire plus expectation that these things are true. So we don't just want them to be true, we expect them to be true. Okay? Yeah, Rick?
You know, we were talking about, you explained, faith, and faith is this, is the evidence, of the belief.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to see that in motion, go to a funeral by Christians of a Christian that died,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't grieve the same way.
Right, right.
We don't grieve it's not goodbye, it's see you in a while.
Yeah,
For us, it's not the same thing.
yeah.
It's a, I've had friends at work that I've tried to talk to about, when they have people that have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And, they notice the peculiarity, when you have a piece, and they don't. And it's like, why is that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
You try to explain that to them, and just like Chris was saying, they don't have this thing.
Right.
They have Christ in their life, but they don't understand it.
Well, yeah,
And when you have that in your life, then you will understand it, and you will have peace.
yeah.
That's what I try to do is, don't worry about the loved one that passed on, work on you.
Yeah.
So that you can have
Yeah. Yeah, because see, the thing is, we have very, very specific things that God has put before us that we have put our total trust in, and we know those things are there. That's big, Chris, and then Gina.
Yeah, belief, faith, and trust, they work in concert, but they're not the same thing. I can believe, but I don't have to have faith. I have to have faith in order to trust. The faith is what gives me the trust, the belief is what brings the faith.
Yeah, yeah, you think of,
So they work in concert, but they're not the same thing.
yeah, James didn't say the demons also have faith
Right.
and tremble. It said they believe, but they didn't have faith. Yeah, very good, that's right. Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, Gina?
I remember something you said weeks ago about the difference between believing in God and believing God.
Yeah, yeah,
Totally different things.
yeah,
People who say that they just believe in a God or, whatever, that's one thing. But this is believing God,
yeah,
what he said, putting your hope in those things, having that conviction that those things are so.
yeah.
And that really stuck with me weeks ago when you said that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know a bunch of people that believe in God. Okay.
Most everybody I know.
Yeah. I know a bunch of people that believe in God, but they don't believe God. You know, and it's obvious. Okay. Yeah, Sheila, and then we'll shut down here.
It's safe to be like, you know, when you pray and you ask God to, you know, bless me to believe in you and bless me to believe your word. And you know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
you know, I got to get it some kind of way. I'm just not going to do it on my own. So
Right,
I mean, it's
right.
okay to pray for that.
Sure. Yeah. And so what people asked Jesus, you know, increase our faith, right? And his answer was, if you have faith as a mustard seed. So the thing is, it's not how much, because mustard seed is really tiny, right? So it's not how much faith you have, it's what kind of faith you have. And that's what he's talking about here. This is a certain quality of faith. Yeah, exactly. And this is the one that saves. So next time, Lord permitting, we'll just drop into, well, we'll have a couple of things to finish up with verse 3, but then we'll get right into Abel and go on from there and look at these examples. Thank you very much. Class dismissed. Good class. Thank you, guys.